Okay guys, this is my third attempt at recording this video, but each time my kids have come in yelling like crazy animals and I've had to stop. So, third time's a charm. We have really been trying to figure out how to understand what that decimal thuniverse really means. We know what a whole number means. It's how many whole objects we have. But that decimal thuniverse is a little bit more confusing. So, I think it's really nice to remember that a decimal thuniverse, that decimal part, can also be explained as a fraction. And fractions are a lot of times easier for our brains to connect with, especially the fraction 1/2. I think we can all picture what half of a candy bar looks like, or half of a cupcake. And so if we can look at every decimal thuniverse part as how it compares to a half, is that amount greater than half? Is it less than half? Or is it equal to half? We can really start to understand what that decimal part means. And so that's the goal of this. Greater than, less than, equal to half. So you can kind of see here we have our tenths frame, which breaks one whole object into 10 equal pieces. Here we have our hundredths frame, and that's going to take that same object, whether it's a brownie or a candy bar, and it's going to chop it up into 100 equal pieces, making each one a hundredth. Or we have our crazy thousandths frame, which takes that one whole and divides it up into 1,000 equal pieces. And our first job is kind of going to figure out how many of these tenths, for example, would be exactly half, and how many of these hundredths would be exactly half, and how many of these thousandths. And we know that if I think about 10, if I want to give you half of 10, I know that I'm going to give you 5 out of those 10. And if I kind of show you what this looks like, if I grab the highlighter here, you can see that, 1/10, definitely not half. 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, here is 5/10. And hopefully you can see that 5 out of 10, or 5/10, would be equal to exactly half of that object. For this next one, it wouldn't be 5/100ths. It would require more out of these 100 pieces to make half. It would actually be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 of these hundredths it would take to equal exactly half of this candy bar, half of this cupcake. And then, of course, for thousandths, if we have 1,000 pieces, if we want to get half of them, it's going to require a pretty big amount. To give you an idea, this piece right here is just 10, clearly nowhere near a half. In fact, this whole strip, if I counted up each of those individual thousandths, would actually be 100. So that's 100, 200, 300, 400. It would actually take 500 thousandths, 500 out of these 1,000 pieces to make exactly half. So there's a kind of a more clear way of seeing that. And then if we kind of say, okay, what does that fraction look like as a decimal? Well, 5/10 means the same as 5/10 as a decimal. 50 hundredths as a fraction, 50 out of the 100, is the same as 50 hundredths as a decimal. And again, 500 thousandths as a fraction is written like this, 500 thousandths as a decimal. So we're going to try and figure out where some decimal thuniverse parts fall in relationship to that half. So if we take a look at this one says 7/10. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the tenths frame. And I know, based on what we talked about, that it takes 5 out of these 10 pieces to make exactly half. Well, with 7/10, I don't have 5 out of 10. I actually have more than 5 out of 10. I have 7 out of the 10. And since 5 out of the 10 would be exactly half, if I have 7 out of the 10, then I would have greater than half. So 7/10 actually represents an amount greater than or more than 1/2 of that object. Let's look at another one. This one is 14 hundredths. So if I grab that hundredths frame, again, I know what exactly half would be. Exactly half of these 100 pieces would be 50. I don't have 50, I only have 14. And if I grab that highlighter, you can very easily see, it's going to might be a thick piece, but you can very easily see there's 10 of those hundredths. And if I grab 4 more of them, you can see that that is definitely less than half of that entire object. So 14 hundredths would be less than half. because 50 hundredths would be exactly half. How about this one? This one we're dealing with 2/10. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that tenths frame. I have it divided into 10 equal pieces. And if I'm going to highlight what I'm dealing with, I'm only dealing with 2 of these little tenths. And we already talked about that 5/10 is exactly half, but I have less than 5/10. I only have 2/10. And therefore, 2/10 is representing an amount that is less than half of the whole thing. Let's try the next one. All right, here we're dealing with 50 hundredths. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my hundredths frame. And what we've already talked about is 50 out of the 100 is exactly half. So if I have 50 hundredths, that is an amount that is exactly equal to half. I can sort of take this whole piece and look at half of it, and these 50 hundredths is exactly the same thing as half of that whole cupcake or half of that whole brownie. All right, here we have 89 hundredths. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that hundredths frame. Again, I know that 50 out of 100 is exactly half, but I actually have 89 out of the 100 that I'm representing here. Well, 89 is greater than 50, and since 50 is half, then 89 hundredths is representing an amount that is greater than half. Ooh, this is a good one. This is 34 thousandths. So I'm going to have to grab that crazy thousandths frame. And if you remember, we talked about an amount that's pretty big to make half. If I'm going to chop this guy in half, it's going to take 500 of these little thousandths to make half. But I don't have 500. I only have a measly 34 out of these 1,000 pieces here, because I have 34 thousandths. Since 34 is way less than 500, then I know that 34 thousandths as a decimal part is actually representing an amount that is quite less than half. All right, I think one last one. So this one is 9/10. So if I go ahead and grab our tenths frame, again, I know that I'm dealing with 9/10, which looks like this. And I know that 5/10, having 5 out of 10 is exactly half. If I have 9 out of 10, that means I almost have the entire thing. Not quite, but almost. You can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 9, whoa, that was terrible, 9/10 of these guys shaded, which means only one of those tenths isn't included. So you can definitely see I am dealing with an amount greater than half, and honestly, not that far from one whole. If I ate 9/10 of a brownie, I ate almost the whole brownie. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to see how well you're understanding what I'm talking about. You're going to go ahead and you're going to get on to Google Classroom. And right underneath where you got to click on this video, you're going to click on a quizzes link, which I'll show you in just a second. You're going to try this out. What I would like you to do is really try. It's going to ask you if decimals are greater than half, less than half, or equal to half. And I would really like you to try and beat 80%. If you go through this and you get a score less than 80%, I want you to try it again. And I want you to keep going until you have at least accomplished a score of 80% or more. If you still have time and you did not get 100% the first time, but you got maybe a 90% and you want to go back and try for that 100%, great. But I'm requiring you to at least try again if you got less than 80%. If you happen to finish and we're still not ready to move on to our next topic, you can get on to front row until I tell you otherwise. But I do want to show you where this Google Classroom is. So if you get on Google Classroom, you guys are right here. And I don't have the video on because I'm making it right now. So the video was the thing you just clicked. Right underneath it, you're going to see a thing that says quizzes game greater than, less than, or equal to half. Click this part where it says sign in to Google accounts. And that's going to take you here. We're going to have an opportunity to click on your email address. You're going to have to click there and then hit allow. And that's always what you're expected to do. It just is what it is. You're going to go ahead and enter your name. Don't enter my name, enter your name, and click Join Game. And it's going to run you through some questions. I know you're going to do a great job. Good luck.